Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to be telling you about the top 10 cards from the latest Pokemon trading card game expansion, Breakthrough. Now, this is slightly later than I usually like to do these videos, life and work and such. Nobody cares why. Let's just go through it now, and usually this is a proper first impression where we haven't had many tournaments. We have had a few tournaments with Breakthrough now, so clearly the results of those tournaments are going to factor in. Now, we are recording this in the end of January 2016. These cards are going to be legal for many years, well, a couple of years at least, and they're going to be legal for many tournaments. So it might well be, not unlike Celebi Prime back in Triumphant, that one of these cards might be utter garbage for quite some time, and then you never know, it could become good later on. And it is, of course, my personal opinion here, because we are very early on. It's not such an objective thing, so if you want to have an argument, I suggest you chuck it down there in the comments. And while you're scrolling down to put a comment, why not click the like button? Why not click subscribe? It could be fun. So let's start off with a couple of just mentions first of all. There are a few reprints in this set, including cards like Floatstone and Super Rod, which have actually been brought back into the set by virtue of their being reprinted here. None of them are truly groundbreaking, so I'm not going to be popping them back in, except for there's one. There's one which I think does change a lot, so it's going in. The rest of them, it really isn't all that big a deal, so I'm mentioning them here, but we're not going to go through. Now, my first honourable mention goes to a card which my regular listeners / watchers will know that I'm very excited about, Mamoswine. Now, Mamoswine isn't actually particularly good, though I would dearly like it to be. The reality is, it's just not a particularly good card. The ability seems really quite pedantic in that it only reduces damage done by fire or water Pokemon, and the attack just plain is too expensive and doesn't do enough damage. There is one possible way to make it playable, and we are clutching at straws here, but it evolves from Piloswine, which has the attack Gathering Footsteps. 30 damage plus 10 more for each cost of the Swinub, Piloswine and Mamoswine's retreat. So Piloswine has a retreat cost of 2, so it would add 20 damage, whereas Mamoswine has a retreat cost of 4 and would add 40 damage. So what you would do is you would play this with the Stadium Shrine of Memories so that you can use Mamoswine to attack as Piloswine. You could also use, for instance, a Maxie's Hidden Ball trick to get a Mamoswine or a Piloswine out much more quickly and easily. The reality is the attack is overpriced, it's a little bit too slow, and it's just plain not good enough. Now, the one card that just missed my top 10 list was Empoleon. Now, I've seen this played quite a lot, and I've seen people testing with it and having some success. Honestly, I don't think it's good enough, and there's another card which is similar, which is much better, which does come much higher up on the list. What you would do with Empoleon is you would play it with Archie's Ace in the Hole, so you could get it out nice and quickly, as if it were a basic Pokemon, and then all your basic Pokemon do 20 more damage, kind of like having a muscle band attached to everything. Now, one of the most sensible partners for this would be Seismitoad EX. You're now doing 50 damage for Quaking Punch while blocking trainers for just a double colourless energy, and then you can, use Muscle Band to add 20 more damage, etc, etc. The thing is, Empoleon, especially in Standard, is quite difficult to actually get onto the field, and I don't think it does enough given the amount of cards that you have to use. And remember that Archie's Ace in the Hole can only be used where it's the last supporter in your hand, the last card in your hand, and even then you've got to have an Empoleon in the discard pile. It is too much effort and it's not likely to work. So let's go through our top 10 list. In at number 10, we have Octillery, a card that could see an awful lot of play or not very much play, depending on the decks that become popular and the options we have to draw cards. Now, Octillery at the moment, The attack is garbage. We ain't looking at the attack. We are looking at the ability Abyssal Hand, which is not a word. Abysmal Hand would be much better because, of course, you want to use this when you have an abysmal hand. Boom, I went there. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. The biggest problem for Octillery at the moment is Shaman. Most of the time, you can use Shaman EX's setup ability to set up, ironically, as much as you want, and you don't really need a card like Octillery. Yes, there will be some decks where it's good, and the ability is quite nice, and that's why it comes in at number 10. In at number 9, we have Noctowl, and I am ready to admit that this one might be a bit more personal preference than actually going to be good, which is why it comes nice and low down the list. I love this Noctowl's attack. For 1 double colourless energy, 20 damage times the number of trainers in each player's hand. So what you would do is you would pair this up with Vileplume. You would make a very trainer-heavy list in order to get the Vileplume out as quickly as possible. And then you would block your opponent playing trainers, so you would hopefully have a few trainers in hand, as would your opponent, and off you go. Biggest problem for Noctowl, it's just plain not as good as Vespiquen. Vespiquen is also a stage 1 that attacks for a double colourless energy. The thing is, you compare this with Vileplume, and then not only is it a more consistent deck, but Forest of Giant Plants not only allows Vileplume to evolve up whenever you like, because it allows grass Pokemon to evolve even if they haven't been down for a turn, but it also allows Vespiquen to evolve up in 1 turn. I still like Noctowl. I think it's got potential, and I hope one day it becomes better. It's not good enough yet, but as this is a first look, I think it deserves to be on there just for pure, unadulterated potential. Now, Noctowl does have a break, which was just plain released as a promo recently, and the break for free energy does 60 plus 30 for each trainer in your opponent's hand. It's pretty gosh darn good, but again, for the time being, we are probably just going to be playing Vespiquen. In at number 8, another card which is more potential than good right now, although it has seen a little bit of play, Giovanni's Scheme. And this is a rare trainer which actually allows a choice of actions. Either you can draw until you have 5 cards in your hand, or you can do 20 more damage to the active Pokemon. Now, this is really quite good because in the early game, it allows you to draw cards, and in the late game, or in the mid game, or indeed the early game, if it comes down to it, it allows you to just do that extra 20 damage you need in order to get a KO. Neither of those on its own is stunning. Essentially, you've got a choice between Empoleon or Octillery, but the fact that you can do either really gives it a utility that so many cards don't have. Speaking of cards that give you a choice, in at number 7 we have a, unique for the time being card, Parallel City. A stadium card which affects both sides of the table differently. One side of the table can only have 3 benched Pokemon. The other side of the table has the attacks from their grass, fire, or water Pokemon reduced by 20 damage. So there are 2 things you can do with this card. If you're playing against one of those decks, let's say for instance a Vespiquen deck, then you can reduce their attacks by 20 damage, and it means that for Vespiquen, they need 2 more Pokemon in the discard in order to get that KO thereafter. Or you can use it to reduce your opponent's bench, and thereby making it more difficult for them to do what they like. Now, there is a weird kind of use for this, and that is to play Parallel City and reduce your own bench size down to 3 in the late game. So the theory is, by the late game, you've probably got a full bench of 5 Pokemon, and 1 or 2 of them is likely to be a Shaman EX. Shaman EX has 110 HP, and when KO'd, gives up 2 prizes. So you can actually play Parallel City on yourself to reduce your bench down to 3, and discard your 2 Shamans to take away your opponent's chance to KO them cheaply and win the game. In at number 6, Assault Vest. Now, this is a card which is always going to remain a potential favourite for the time being, because anytime any Pokemon that relies on special energy gets big, down comes Assault Vest. If you get attacked by a Pokemon with special energy attached, it does 40 less damage. But this really comes into its own with Entei. And what Entei does is it allows you to attach 2 Pokemon tools. I.e., what you can do here is actually attach 2 Assault Vests, and through Theta Double, that actually allows you to attach both of them at once. And then if your opponent's got any special energy attached, it reduces damage done by 80. It is arguable that Assault Vest alone has made Entei a viable and, quite frankly, good deck. In at number 5, we've got each of top 5, ladies and gentlemen. It is time to get a little bit excited. We have Bridget, and it allows you to search for 1 EX or 3 basics and put them onto your bench. Now remember, they go straight onto your bench, so no shenanigans here with Shaman. Shaman would go straight onto your bench and the ability would not be activated. This is really good for any decks that require a little bit of a setup. So let me give you one example of a situation in which this would be good. Let's say you're playing a Vespiquen deck. One of the problems you've got, Combee. He's got 40 HP. And when you play against any Bats deck, as soon as you put a Combee down, your opponent will usually drop 2 Golbats and use both the abilities to kill your 40 HP Combee. Not ideal. So instead, you use Bridget to search for 3 Combees. And don't get me wrong, your opponent can still kill one of them using a pair of Golbats. But that's all they can do. They can kill one of them. They cannot kill all 3. I suppose theoretically they could drop 4 Golbats and kill 2 of them, but it's very, very rare your opponent is going to be able to get 4 Golbats in one turn. I was essentially knocked out of a tournament in Top Cut this year playing Vespiquen because every time I faced a Bats deck, I couldn't get enough Combees down quickly enough because I wasn't playing Bridget. Not the only use, ladies and gentlemen, but a pretty good use nonetheless. Moving up to 4, and this is where I'm feeling pretty good about my top 4. The order here, I think you could play around a little bit. But at number 4, I'm going Zoroark and Zoroark Break. Now, Zoroark on his own is one of the rare examples of a Pokemon who has a good ability and a good attack. The attack for a double colourless energy does 10 damage plus 30 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Now, don't get me wrong, your opponent can limit the amount of Pokemon they put on their bench to limit the amount of damage you do, but if they do that, they are deliberately not benching Pokemon that they would like to bench. So even though your damage is slightly reduced, your opponent is not playing the way they want to play, and that is good for you. It's also got the ability Stand In, which is the new Keldeo's Rush In. You get to put him active whenever you like, and then of course you pop a Floatstone on him, he can retreat for free, and that means that you will never have a Pokemon stuck in the active, and special conditions like Paralysis no longer bother you. Got a paralyzed Pokemon, use Zoroark to stand in and then retreat. Got a Pokemon you don't want in the active, pop Zoroark in the active using his ability, and use Floatstone to free retreat. It's pretty gosh darn good. And he does have a break, which means he can use Foul Play for 1 Dark Energy. And it means that you copy one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. And ladies and gentlemen, you copy the attack regardless of the attack cost, which means you can end up doing some fairly beefy attacks for just a single Dark Energy. And that is pretty gosh darn good. Coming in at number 3, and the reason this gets number 3 over Zoroark is because I believe this has the potential to be a very, very good deck. And that is Mewtwo EX and its associated Mega. Now there's 2 Mewtwo's in this set. The good one is the one with Scattershot. 2 decent attacks here. For 1 Psychic Energy, 30 damage times the amount of Psychic Energy attached to this Pokemon. For 2 Psychic and a Colourless, you essentially swap damage counters with your opponent's active Pokemon. So unless they do 170 damage to you, They can do as much damage as you want, and then you can just take that damage and put it on them instead. Now, obviously, if they've got more damage than you wouldn't use damage change. I think that pretty much goes without saying. But we've also got the Mega Mewtwo EX. And this is the one with Psychic Infinity. Again, there's 2 in the set. This is the one I think is good. 10 damage plus 30 more for each energy attached to each active Pokemon. You've got 2 energy, your opponent's got 2 energy. That's 130 damage for a double colorless energy. And then we bring back Shrine of Memories, that card I mentioned a few minutes ago. Now you have a 210 HP Mega Mewtwo, and you can use your attacks. And if your opponent doesn't one-hit KO you, and you've got 210 HP, then you can use Damage Swap to get rid of all the damage and completely heal yourself. And of course, you've got both Scattershot and you've got Mega Mewtwo's attack, both of which do more damage for each energy attached to you. And now that you're using a Mega Pokemon, you can use Mega Turbo to attach more Psychic Energy much more quickly than you could otherwise. Now, this has a weakness to some decks like Night March, but it's still got enough potential that I'm willing to put it as the 3rd best card in Breakthrough. Coming in at number 2, it is a reprint, but there's 2 reasons why Judge makes it in at number 2. The first reason is it's been a while since this was released. It last came around in Unleashed, and for that reason it's been away long enough that it's basically a new card. But secondly, I think Judge has an awful lot of potential. Something that has already won me a couple games since Breakthrough came out, and I've only been to a couple of tournaments, is when I go first, I get decently set up, and then I play a Judge. I've already got a decent setup because I've had a turn to use my Shamans and everything else. I judge my opponent, so they end up starting with 5 cards rather than an average of about 6 or 7. And now they are at a distinct disadvantage. And if they don't draw anything, you win the game straight there. I think Judge is a very underrated card. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of people are saying it's good, but I still see it as underrated. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think, especially with VS Seeker in the format, meaning one Judge can be used a maximum of 5 times, there is every possibility that Judge will become a tech in almost every deck, so that people in the early game can go, I'm set up, you're not, have a Judge. And coming in at number 1, and I don't know whether I'm going to live to regret this, because quite frankly, we are new into the format. But as far as I am concerned, and I am feeling very confident with this pick, the best card in Breakthrough is Gallade. I love Gallade. Now, first of all, it's got the ability Premonition, which allows you to rearrange the top 5 cards of your deck. That gives you a really good consistency boost, because you really need a double colorless energy. Well, if it's in the top 5 cards of your deck, you can guarantee you'll top it next turn. Unless your opponent plays a Judge, of course. If you really need a supporter, you can guarantee you're going to get one as long as it's in the top 5 cards. It really adds consistency. But that's not why we're playing it. That is nothing but a handy bonus. We've got the attack Sensitive Blade. As long as you've used a supporter card that turn, it does 130 damage. Gee whiz, you know what that might be good for killing? Shaman EX, which has 110 HP and a resistance to fighting. And of course, if you use a Lysander to bring the Shaman into the active, then that means you will get a KO on that Shaman for just 1 energy attachment of a double colorless energy. And it's not just that you can kill a Shaman nice and easily, although don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, that is a hefty bonus. No. What's really good about Gallade is, after you've killed that Shaman for 2 prizes, what you've got left in the active is a 150 HP single prize Pokemon, which means it's going to take a lot of effort for your opponent to kill Gallade, and they only get 1 prize from it. If they don't kill the Gallade, then you can just keep attacking with it turn after turn after turn. And just in case this needed any more to be good, because although everything I've said so far makes it good, that isn't what makes it the best card in the set. What brings it to best card in the set status is Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick. You can use Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick to bring Gallade out on turn 1 as if it was a basic Pokemon. That is what makes Gallade the best card in the set. Now, right at the beginning, when I gave you Empoleon as an honourable mention, I told you that having to use Archie's Ace in the Hole to get the Empoleon was too much effort for the advantage it gave you. That is not the case for Gallade, ladies and gentlemen. This card is just plain good. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. I've got my top 10 list. As usual, the only thing I ask is, if you disagree with my list, please give me a complete top 10 list in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got this far, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at the Wassy. I will be back with more top 10 lists, except soon I'm going old school. I'm giving you actual top 10 lists from sets which have been and gone and where I can give you a definitive answer. Thank you very much for watching. Look after yourselves till next time. My name is Ross and you've been watching PTCG Radio.